Hello and welcome to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast. Sorry we're a little bit late this week. There's some technical difficulties and I needed some new sound equipment to come in to address them. But now that we are good to go, I hope that we could be a little bit more regular moving forward. Our guest today is Joel McCoy. He's the founder of the Big Box PC Game Collectors Group on Facebook, a community with just about 3,700 members at the time of this recording. Thank you for joining us, Joel.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So your Big Box PC Game Collectors Group, is that something that's specific to Facebook, or do you have other branches? Do you have a Twitter or a website or anything like that? Do you branch out at all?
We have a Twitter, but I haven't been using it very much because I wasn't getting a whole lot of engagement out of Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm unique in that either, because a lot of people that I was interacting with haven't really been on there much anymore either. But we have a website as well, but the website really only serves the podcast, so I don't really post on there a whole lot either. So I guess the real answer to your question is it's mostly a Facebook group.
Right. And but you did do a podcast as well, and is that still going on?
Yeah, the podcast was an interesting one because I made really good friends with several of the members, and we used to get on Google Hangouts and just kind of jam and talk about big box games. And we decided one day, we're like, well, I mean, if we say something cool, maybe someone might want to hear it later. Mm-hmm. So we started recording stuff, and that's kind of where the podcast still kind of is just recordings of our conversations, and we still get on there and have conversations every once in a while. So that it's really just an archive of our nerdy conversations.
Yeah. Because I did actually check out a few of those. Is there a regular schedule by which you release those?
There's no regular schedule at all. It's really just whenever I have time. Because, as you well know, editing these things is a beast. It just takes so much time. And I, of course, work a 9 to 5 like everybody else. So finding time to do this stuff can be a challenge.
Yeah. That's why I like to keep to fairly shorter episodes, because I find the standard, for me, the average time is usually about the length of the interview times 3 is about the amount of time that it takes to edit it down. So that's why I generally, out of laziness, kind of keep them a little bit short. But so how old is the Big Box PC Game Collectors Group?
I think it's knocking on like 5 years now.
5, okay.
I've been doing this for 5 years. Mm-hmm. When I started, I did not think that I would be still moderating or dealing with this. Like, it was just kind of an off-the-cuff thing. Mm-hmm. And here I am 5 years later, and I'm still moderating this group every day, and trying to keep engagement up.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely one of the things that is kind of a hidden job of when you try to admin or moderate one of these groups, is like it's really on you to kind of keep a lot of the traffic going and to keep the momentum going. Because if you stop that, it kind of, it decelerates until it'll eventually hit inertia.
Yeah. Whenever I first started 5 years ago-ish, I was mostly just talking to myself in there just to make sure there were posts, Mm-hmm. And it's a weird feeling kind of talking to yourself, but I knew if there wasn't something there that no one would bother to even show up, So, but now once you get up to the over 1,000 people, it almost becomes like auto drive. So I don't really have to worry about it as much.
Yeah, for sure. So what was it that made you start the group in the first place?
Well, around the time that I started the group was about the time that my mom passed away, about 5-ish years ago.
Okay.
And it was, I don't know if anyone out there who's listening has ever lost a parent or something. You kind of look for hobbies or activities to occupy your mind, Mm-hmm. And I think that anyone who played PC games back in the early 80s was a collector of some sort, because I don't think I was a unique child in having all these boxes up on my shelf, So whenever that was also about the time that that game collecting started kind of blowing up. I remember I was kind of getting back into Nintendo stuff, and I was finding communities on Facebook of people that were collecting Nintendo stuff, and I was looking for a PC community, people who collected PC games, because that was really my passion, was the PC stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find any. There weren't any there, so I was like, I was just sitting there one day, and I thought, well, I mean, why don't I just make one, So I threw this group out there just on a whim, just thinking, well, let's see what happens. And that is pretty much how it started, was basically because I could not find any PC game collecting groups.
Mm. Yeah, so it's like basically an untapped little, not really quite a market, but I guess like a niche there.
Yeah, and back then at least, I think the collecting world's a little different now, but back then, the Nintendo folks, I couldn't really engage with them on the PC game level. Like, you post a picture of, I don't know, King's Quest V in there, or just pull something out. They either just, it wasn't something they were interested in, or they just didn't care, So it was pretty lonely. I found out later, much later, through Stuart and Jim, that there was this group, I guess you'd call it a mailing list, or a Usenet group called Software Collect, but it was not as easy to find as something like a Facebook group. So there were like pockets of people out there, but there was nothing on a major social media platform.
Mm-hmm. Well, now it's like probably one of the definitely one of the most active Facebook communities that I really see, or at least that I'm a part of, for sure.
Yeah, we have quite I'm kind of shocked at how many posts we have per day. And one of the fun things about PC games, and when I say PC, I'm referring to personal computers, that we do Apple and Commodore and all that stuff.
Yes, that's right.
Like, the amount of stuff that you can be acquired when you're collecting computer games is vast, because it's basically the entire history of gaming. Mm-hmm. So every day someone's posting something that I never knew about or had never seen. That's one of the most fun things about computer game collecting over something like Nintendo. I've never seen Nintendo or Genesis or any sorts of games that I've never heard of before.
That's right, yeah. At this point especially.
Yeah.
And you have some really high-profile members in there, too, don't you?
Well, I was lucky. Whenever I bumped into Pascal, anyone who's a member of the group or any of these groups is going to know who Pascal is. And he was like one of the first members. I kind of bumbled into the Sierra group, or one of those adventure groups, and I didn't know at the time that it was kind of bad manners to like advertise stuff, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I bumped in there, I was like, hey, anybody want to join the big box group? And Pascal's kind of jumped on it,
Yeah.
And he just started dumping his friends in there, like,
cool.
Like Pascal's probably most responsible for getting that thing off the ground, because he just knew everybody. Then I bumped into like Stuart and Joe Garrity and KG and all these early folks, and they just knew people, and they started adding people, and before you know it, these people had all been in contact with people like John Romero and Alvo and, a lot of those folks through their other groups and whatnot. And I asked a few, and we asked them, and some of the developers of these games were interested. Like Romero's a collector, right? So he's like, yeah, I'm all into this. Some of them, when you ask them, are like, hey, people collect this stuff? This is like garbage.
Yeah.
Like it was just a job for them. That's fine. I get it. But so yeah, we got Romero, and I've been able to meet some people that I never thought I would meet. Richard Garriott and Alvo and Brenda Romero, just a whole bunch of people. Bob Bates was a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. Rebecca Heineman, she's a good one.
And these are and these are all now members of the group?
I think so. Most of them are.
Yeah.
Some of them we keep in contact with, but but they may not like the Facebook clutter, or
Right.
they probably just aren't in the collecting scene or whatever. But yeah, I'm in generally constant contact with a lot of these people because they befriended me on Facebook now. So what a treat! What a treat that was as
Yeah.
a side effect of the group that I didn't realize would actually be a thing.
Yeah, and especially when you're so passionate about big box collecting and you run into these people who made a lot of the games that you're collecting. That's pretty bizarre, eh?
Yeah, totally. It's like never thought.
Mhm. How long did it take for you to reach 1,000 members?
Gosh, I have no idea. Probably about a year. It's weird. It was probably sort of like a bell curve. Like it was kind of slow at the beginning, and then it like shot up real fast, and then now we're kind of. I say this a lot in our various chats, but I think that we're kind of leveling off now. Like I feel like we probably tapped most of the PC game collecting community that's probably going to be interested in something like this. It's a pretty niche market.
Yeah, it is, but then you also see that we're kind of. It's also one that's really booming right now too. If you compare I've only been collecting for probably about a year now myself, and I'm almost going to have to stop real soon because I can't afford to continue.
No.
Everything that I'm glad I started a year ago because I was actually able to afford what I got now, and I got most of what I'm looking for. There'll never really be an end to that list, but I got all the ones that I really wanted. And if I look back now sometimes and see, like, man, I would never have been able to get this if I started it now.
I have a theory about why we're continuing to get people to trickle in, and I think it's because Nintendo collecting is sort of. I keep throwing Nintendo out there because it's like an easy target, and I collect Nintendo stuff, so I'm not like anti-Nintendo or anything. But the Nintendo folks, Nintendo collecting is like a finite. Like there's a certain number of games. Once you get to that point, you're sort of done, right? Like your collecting is kind of over. I think a lot of the really hardcore Nintendo collectors either have all the games that they want or have all of them. And they probably see some of the stuff that's going on in our community. Like Ernest posted the other day a Microsoft adventure from like 1979, right?
Oh, wow.
So if you want to get into games that are as old as gaming, that's it, right? So, we're talking about actual like vintage stuff. So I think it appeals to a lot of the collectors out there to want to get into this old, hard to find stuff.
How big is your collection at this point?
I actually have sort of what I would describe as a medium-sized collection. I look at some of the folks in the group, like Stuart and Ernest and like Pascal, and these guys have these massive collections. I don't have like these huge numbers, but then I tend to focus on RPGs mostly, which stinks for me because those are typically the most expensive ones.
That's right.
I don't know why, but the RPGs are like the most expensive things to collect.
Yeah.
And the games that meant something to me as a child. And when I say meant something to me as a young person, I mean either I had it and loved it or wanted it. Right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically how I started too, because I grew up with a lot of these games. I wouldn't say I had a collection or even a sizable one, but there was a lot of games that I did have that are actually worth quite a bit now. But when I moved out of my parents' place when I was, still a kid, I just threw them all out because I was like, well, why do I need this anymore? And I regret there's some of which I'm never going to get again for any price that I'm willing to spend. But
most collectors have a similar horror story. When me and my wife moved into the house we're still in, we were boxing. And when anyone who's ever moved all your stuff knows that you start like determining what's important to you real quick, like right. And we I had to shuffle what was essentially empty boxes, right? And I'm like, man, I want to move all these empty boxes. And, a great purge happened. My mind wasn't in that collecting space, and I was just like
that's right.
Tossing out stuff. Like I had Castlevania, the PC box, stomped on it, threw it in the garbage. That's like, God knows how much that costs now. I'll never see that again.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is painful. things that now that I'm plugged in, now that I'm in the know, I'm like, God, why did I do that? So stupid.
Yeah. But yeah, that's also kind of what motivates me, at least, and probably you as well, to actually get into collecting, is to reacquire these things that sort of meant something to us.
Yeah, reconnecting with my childhood was a big part of Mom passing too 5 years ago. Like, I got back into miniature painting and got back into like tabletop gaming and stuff, and just, it was. I don't know. Psychologists could probably have a field day with that, but
No kidding.
that's just kind of the way it was, And anyway, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So, out of the things in your current collection, what's your favorite? Do you have like a favorite, or even like a top 3 of favorite items in your collection?
My number one favorite set is easily my Ultimos.
Yeah.
Because they were impossible for me to attain when I was younger, because I live in the armpit of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing here. Buying games, when I was younger, piracy was pretty much the only way to get stuff, because there was no store here that sold them. So anyway, I would go on a rare trip to Babbage's and see an Ultima 7 box, on the shelf, and just desperately want it.
Yeah.
And now I got it, by golly.
And that's just such a great box too. Like everything from like the design of the box, the look of it, the game itself is awesome. Everything that's included is great. It's probably one of the best ones that I can really think of.
Opening that box is just magical. I mean, the map, it's just, all this stuff. That's it, all the papers and everything. All that. I mean, my nerd alarms just go off real hard whenever I'm like digging through all those manuals and stuff.
Yeah, and that's one that I got rid of too. Like it wasn't even actually mine. It's I was moving out around the same time as my best friend, and we were cleaning out his basement, and he was getting rid of all this stuff, and he's like, "Oh, do you want this?" I'm like, "Well, I'll take the cloth map, but I don't need the rest of it." So he totally just tossed out Ultima 7, and it's like, "Oh, damn it! If only I could. If only I could go back." Right? So.
Yeah. Now, not all of my games. A lot of my games did survive the purge. There were some that were so dear to me that I just could not get rid of them. Like some of my King's Quest V, some of my Sierra stuff, King's Quest 6, my gold box games.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Oh, no, Eye of the Beholder stuff. Those are pretty high on my list. And gold box stuff, especially because the Pool of Radiance and Curse of the Azure Bonds dominated my childhood. Like hours and hours and hours in those games. Never finished either one of them because they're freaking impossible. But yeah, Eye of the Beholder, I don't know how many hours I spent on that game. That entire gold box set is also just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and they're obviously designed to take up a lot of time, and we had a lot of time back then too, so
yeah.
It's not really, it's something that you can't really capture today, or at least not for people our age, where you have like the game that's basically designed to be played for a year until you get the next game, and then we actually have hours a day to play it.
Yeah, and I keep buying these collector's editions, and I love them. They're some of my favorite boxes or collector's editions, but none of them. I tell the story all the time to some of my friends. They're probably sick and tired of hearing it, but nothing will compare to when Ultima 9 came out. Right, I was super excited. I was finally adult enough to be able to buy a game, and Ultima 9 was a terrible game. Let's just get that out of the way. But the box was awesome.
Yeah,
because I got the Dragon edition, right? And I still have the one that I had back then because that was one of the ones that was too precious of mine to actually throw away. But anyway, me and my then girlfriend, now wife, drove all the way to Asheville, which is a city that's somewhat close to us that has a mall, and went to I guess it was the electronics boutique at the time. And I had pre-ordered it, which I think had to have been the first game I ever pre-ordered, and picked it up. And I mean, we were. I was sitting on a bench. She was kind of shopping. I was looking at this box, and I opened it up and was digging through the stuff, and that experience is gone forever.
Yeah.
Like I'll never. That experience will never happen again. buying a Sierra game at Walmart and sitting in Burger King eating a cheeseburger and flipping through the stuff. Like, that'll never happen again, you know?
Yeah.
And it's sad, but it's also my fault because I love Steam, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a huge Steam library, and I'm first and foremost a game player. So I just like cheap games that I don't have to get off my butt to buy, you know? So.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also kind of these days it's kind of cool to have sort of a physical copy of something, but it's kind of also becoming a lot more pointless. I mean, every time I buy, let's say, an Xbox One game, it copies the game to the hard drive and then basically just re-downloads the entire game anyways.
Yeah.
So you didn't really save a whole heck of a lot by having the physical media. And, later consoles aren't really going to be backwards compatible to this because where are they backwards compatible to? Mm-hmm. The disc is pretty much worthless because you have to basically re-download the game anytime you want to, if you want to play it.
I got Fallout 76 Collector's Edition. That was the last one I've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
And I have hit the issue of that box is too big for me to keep. I literally have no clue what I'm going to do with that box. It is massive. It's sitting in our bedroom, probably irritating the crap out of my wife because I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Like, I may actually have to throw that one away because there's just nowhere to put it.
Right.
And that's what these collector's editions are kind of turned into. And that's not recapturing, like, that's the size and the grandiose nature of them isn't bringing back the feelings. It's cool, but it's not the same as like a gold box game, which is considered a big box game, but it's pretty small.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just, I don't know, there was just something really cool about it that they keep trying to replicate it these days, and it's just not really quite hitting the same mark.
This delves a little bit into fantasy. I'm a big fantasy guy as well. Like Dungeons and Dragons was a big part of my childhood, and fantasy art. Like, I just can't get into fantasy art these days. Like, I look at the this is kind of a non sequitur, but I look at the Dungeons and Dragons like 5th edition books, you know, and like the art, I can't dig it. Like Jeff Easley and Larry Elmore, that's where my head's at. So these RPG games nowadays, like the box doesn't compare to this old gold box games, you know, just for sheer coolness factor.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would consider to be your white whale at this point, like the one that you're constantly looking for that just always eludes you?
I just snagged a white whale this week with
sweet.
I got Wizardry for the Wordna. I can't remember what it's called. The Return of Wordna, which is like impossible to find for a reasonable amount of money, and I finally found one. So I'm currently soul searching for a new white whale now, which Stuart Feldhammer, like he's like the white whale slayer. He will send you an eBay link that is affordable for something. He's that guy. I tell you, he really knows eBay, man.
Right. Yeah, it's terrible up here in Canada. A lot of the games that you can find on eBay that actually you fluke out and find a good price, once you try to get it over the border, that savings is out the window. It at least doubles the cost. Yeah. And it's just that's also kind of what's really slowed me down. I haven't even looked for very many big box games. The last one I got was I have Shroud of the Avatar coming to me because I just noticed that it was released onto Amazon, but they didn't ship to Canada. So I had to have it sent to a friend of mine in the States to send it to me in Canada, and then all the shipping and customs duties doubled the price again. So
yeah, I have a Shroud on the shelf over here. I haven't even opened, haven't even taken the shrink wrap off of it yet. I think the box is cool. I need to open it up and see if everything's in there, but I just can't really bring myself to do it for some reason.
Do you have a preference between sealed and open? Like, this is a very contentious topic amongst some people.
It can be, yeah. I am trying to moderate myself in the group on the sealed arguments. I am definitely a open the game kind of guy. Because, number one, it's impossible to enjoy. I'm not a speculator, and I'm not in this for the money. So
right.
It's impossible to enjoy it if you can't open it up, right? And look through the stuff. I have a couple of sealed games, though, so before I get too deep into this, I do have a few. Most of the time, they're either games that I know there's not like anything particularly interesting inside, and I can play them by other means. Right. So, there's no point in me opening them. But, I mean, there's also the so easy to fake it, I've seen videos online of people opening stuff that they thought was a legitimate seal that turned out to be a reseal. A lot of that stuff isn't even like people trying to pull one over on you, because as I have been told many times, the stores like Electronics Boutique and Babs at the time would reseal them if they got returns. So a lot of the times they were resealed in the store. And so it's not even like that. The guy on eBay that's twisted his mustache, right? Yeah. That a lot of those guys they just don't know, And sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. It all depends on how good the guy was that was sealing it.
Right. Yeah, I never even thought about that. I didn't even realize, because I worked at EB Games for a little bit, but there's definitely clear after after big box games really existed, and even at a point where the company itself was starting to care less and less about PC games in general.
I have a somewhat of a fun story since you mentioned EB Games. My wife and I were in the mall a few years ago. It was back when EB Games was still around. It was right before GameStop took them over. Mm-hmm. And I walked in there because I always walked in just for nostalgia's sake, even though PC games aren't really a thing anymore. And they had the bargain bin sitting in the front. And sitting in that bargain bin was a sealed copy of Out of the Boulder 2. Oh, nice. Which I still have sealed because there's a Electronic Arts distribution sticker on the seal that's holographic that can't be faked, so I know it's real. Okay. And a sealed copy of Gateway to Savage Frontier. And I was like, what the heck is this doing in here? So I bought, I picked them up, brought them up to the counter, and was like, "What? Where did these come from, man?" He's like, "Yeah." The guy behind the counter was like, "Yeah, back in the storeroom, there was a pallet back there that had a bunch of stuff on it. And we pulled it out, stuck it in the thing." I was like, "Holy crap! How long was it sitting back there?" Yeah. Sometimes you do still run into stuff.
Yeah, we had a fairly similar situation when I was at EB. It's not so much our back room, but just the stock warehouse, where quite a few years after Katamari Damacy had been out, it was one of those things that didn't really have the biggest success on release. It got this big cult following. Copies of it were pretty rare to come by, and one day we got a shipment in, open it up, there's stacks of brand new sealed Katamari Damacy, and we're like, what the heck's going on? And they're like, yeah, they apparently were clearing out the warehouse and found crates of the stuff that they never actually shipped out.
That's the rub with collecting video games, because these guys who are speculators and all about the value are one warehouse away from having their entire monetary value just being crushed. Right. Because there's just these warehouses are just everywhere, and they're chock full of this junk. You know. Was it the stadium events? Was the one I saw on, I think it was Pat's podcast, and some guy was like, "Oh, you like stadium events?" And he had these unopened boxes full of them, Oh. And I was like, just that photograph that he had of those unopened packs would just kill the value, right? Yeah. Because, there's another 100 of them that we didn't know existed, or I don't know how many it was. But
yeah, wasn't there something similar with I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream?
Yeah, the story behind that is, at least as far as I recollect it, and if I'm wrong in any of the details, please don't skewer me, but the people listening out there, Harlan Ellison had all those games in his garage or basement or whatever. He basically had the unsold stock. And for years, the eBay sales they were selling for like $100 a pop, or as a quote rare unquote game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Harlan Ellison was selling them on his website for like $40 or however much the retail was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was buried on the website. You had to email them, and it was pretty sketchy, but people did it and actually got the games. So I think Night Dive Studios ended up going and buying all of them from him. So the ones you see on Night Dive, I've seen people refer to those as reprints, but that's not actually accurate. From what I understand, Night Dive Studios bought all of them from Harlan Ellison and then is selling them from their store.
Right.
Because I think Harlan Ellison just wanted them gone. He was like, get these things out of my house. So those are pretty legit. But yeah, it's people are spending way too much on that.
Right. Are they still out there right now?
I think they still have some. Yeah, I think they're out of the signed ones, but I think they still have them.
Wow, that must have been quite a few of them then. How many was he sitting?
Yeah,
on?
it was. I mean, the game did not sell very well.
Right.
So there's a lot. I don't know if Harlan Ellison had his contract or something. He was supposed to get them, but that's the urban legend that I have been told. I think the link is still on his website where to order them. Like, I don't think he ever took it down.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if his website's still out there, I don't even know if it's still out there. Maybe. But yeah, anyway, it's funny.
Mm-hmm. So what initially got you into gaming? Like, what would you say is like the first game that really caught you?
One of my first memories that I can still remember, this is because I had this, I was born in 1978.
Mm-hmm.
Our family moved to North Carolina in 1980, so I was 2 years old. And they went to Lowe's, of all places, and bought an Atari 2600. And I can remember sitting on the couch watching, I guess it was my brother and my sister playing Pac-Man, that terrible Pac-Man.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't remember if that was the game. Maybe it's Combat, because Combat came with the system. It's probably Combat. Anyway, I was too young. I couldn't even move the joystick. I wasn't strong enough to move the joystick. But I can remember seeing that, and that stuck with me. And I've been into video games ever since. Like, I literally grew up alongside video games. Like, me and the industry grew up basically side by side. You know?
You literally grew up with the joystick in your hand.
Yeah, basically. And then, so the Atari 2600 was cool. I got into the Nintendo late because my dad was a computer nerd, and he had a TRS-80. The first computer I remember using a lot was the Color Computer 1, TRS-80 Color Computer 1, which we bought at Radio Shack there in town. And we used that for years. And then got a Nintendo for Christmas one year, and the Nintendo was really kind of blew my doors off, you know. But I was always playing the PC games more than anything. PC was always, because we had a Tandy one. When we got to the IBM PC, it was a Tandy. We had a Tandy 1000 SX and an 8088 processor in it. But we had a Baller VGA card in that sucker, and VGA back then was like, you can have your Nintendo. Look what I got.
Yeah.
And then I got the Holder. I guess that would have been around the time Super Nintendo came out. I can't remember the dates, but the graphics were just like, wow, this is where it's at, you know, as a kid, and the rest is history.
I remember because my first computer was actually monochrome, so I was never able to brag about graphics. But
we lived in a green and then amber world for a very long time.
Yes, exactly. Amber monochrome all the way back. And but my source of pride was sort of like, well, you know, the Nintendo. As much as I loved it, I'd travel any distance to play on a friend's Nintendo. But at the same time, it's sort of like, well, you got this controller with like 2, maybe 4 buttons on it. It's like, but the PCs have the keyboard, so you can actually do stuff. You can type stuff. You can like tell characters what to do, what to say. You could play.
Yeah, a game that sticks out to me is one that I spent a lot of time with that was kind of complicated for the time. Was BattleTech Crescent Hawk's Inception. It was a Infocom game, and I spent a lot of time playing that. It was so obtuse and like hard, but it was also intriguing, and like the complication of games like that made the more simple kind of console-y stuff fun, but more of a distraction from the really serious stuff like Ultima 7 and Ultima 6 and all that kind of stuff. Ultima 6 was pretty darn complicated. Ultima 6 had a Super Nintendo release, but really hard to play. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Well, I guess if we were to close out on anything, was there? Do you have any sort of specific goals? Like, what is left for you and the Big Box PC Collectors Group?
That's a good question. I've kind of consolidated back down. Like when I got excited from the success, if you want to call it success, I started branching out. Right, like I was like, oh, where can I go with this? Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and all that. And as I've succeeded and failed, I've kind of consolidated back down to just like the group and YouTube when it's fun. And at this point, I just want to keep the group focused on being a friendly collecting community and not turning into, if you'll excuse the phrase, like a genitalia measuring contest, or like a who's got the most valuable this or that. Yeah, that's my main focus at the moment. Is keeping it where it's at.
Fair enough. Because it's really easy to fall into that because there's so much pride that goes into the collection, so much pride that goes into when you find that hard to find game. It does kind of get to be a bit competitive amongst collectors.
Yeah, especially because the entire function of the group is showing off, essentially. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what we want. But what I don't want is the toxicity of, the comments or whatever. So we have not had a problem with that, and I'm thinking that we probably won't.
Have you noticed any boost or surge of new members coming in ever since the group got mentioned in the Art of Point and Click?
A little. I'll tell you what. We have this questions you have to answer to join. I think Classic Gamers Guild does too.
That's right.
One of the questions we have is, where did you hear about us? I think the number one answer we get is Metal Jesus Rocks, because he mentioned us. He mentioned us in an episode about it was about collecting tips, and he said to join the community, and he flashed us up there. And Metal Jesus Rocks is just if ever there was an ambassador for PC gaming on YouTube, it's him and LGR.
That's right.
Those two guys they basically have that audience, and they deserve it, because they're doing the good work. But LG's Rocks is probably the number one person that has informed people of that we even exist.
Yeah, you look at some groups out there. They've been around for like years and years and years, and they're still probably hovering around 2,000 members. You're already, like I say, you're just on the verge of 3,700 last I checked, just before recording here. So that's one of the bigger groups that I know of that's not like connected to something that's insanely popular. Like, I'm sure if there's some sort of like a Justin Bieber fan group, I'm sure they have millions. But in terms of something like so niche as big box game collecting, that's a huge community.
Yeah, I think we've managed to get most of them. I see we'll get to 4,000 eventually, but I don't see it. And I tell you, I say this all the time. I'm like, we're leveling off, and then 1,000 people later, it's like, no, okay. But I think we're just about it. I think anyone who's going to hear about us probably already has. So,
well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you very much for joining us. Do you have any plugs that you'd like to get out there just before we call this a night?
Let's see, plug. No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you very much again for taking the time to join us. If you ever want to come back, chat some more.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll definitely do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much and have a good night.